am going to tell you something I have never said out loud to another human being. Not to my wife. Not to my brother. Not to the accountant who helped me file for the first time after everything collapsed. Nobody. Because what I did with the money my father left me, the money he spent 31 years building, saving, protecting, is the kind of thing that sits in your chest like a stone. Heavy. Permanent. The kind of shame that doesn't go away when you pay your bills on time or finally get back on your feet or tell yourself you've learned your lesson. It stays. My name is Ryan Mitchell. I am 34 years old. And the worst financial decision of my life didn't happen because I was stupid. It happened because I was grieving. And someone knew exactly how to find a person who was grieving and turn that grief into their profit. This is that story. My father's name was Gerald Mitchell. He was 58 years old when the doctors found the tumor. He was 61 when it killed him. 3 years. That's how long we had from diagnosis to the morning my brother called me at 6:47 a.m. and said the words that split my life into before and after. My father was not a wealthy man in the way people mean when they say wealthy. He didn't have a portfolio. He didn't have a financial advisor. He didn't have a second home or a stock account or anything that would make a banker look twice. What he had was a hardware store on the corner of Delancey and Fifth that he opened when he was 27 years old with money he borrowed from his own father. And he ran that store every single day for 31 years without taking a single vacation longer than 4 days. He was there when it opened. He was there when it closed. He swept the floor himself. He knew every regular customer by name. He knew which contractors came in on Tuesday mornings and which ones came Friday afternoons and what they needed before they asked for it. That store was his life's work. And when he sold it, 18 months before he died, when the treatments made it impossible for him to stand behind that counter anymore, he got $320,000 for it. He put it in a savings account. He didn't invest it. Didn't move it. Didn't try to grow it. Just put it in a savings account at the same bank he'd used since 1987 and left it there. When I asked him why he didn't do something with it, he looked at me the way he looked at things he found complicated and said, "Ryan, I spent 31 years building something real. I'm not going to spend the last of my time gambling it on something I don't understand." I thought he was being old-fashioned. I was wrong. I was completely, catastrophically wrong. And it took me 18 months and every single dollar of that $320,000 to understand exactly how wrong I was. He left it to me and my brother equally. $160,000 each. I want you to sit with that number for a second. Because I know what $160,000 means to most people. It means a down payment on a house. It means your children's education. It means a decade of careful saving finally in your hands. It means your father's entire life reduced to a number and transferred into your account on a Thursday afternoon while you're still wearing the same clothes you wore to his funeral. That's what it felt like. Not like receiving something. Like being handed the weight of everything he was and being told, "Here. Don't drop it." I dropped it. Not all at once. That's the part nobody tells you about losing money. It doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in steps. Small decisions that each feel reasonable. Each feel justified. Each feel like you're being smart, being proactive, doing exactly what you should be doing. Until you're not. It started 3 weeks after the funeral. I was still in that specific fog that follows loss, the one where you're functioning on the outside and completely hollowed out on the inside. Going to work. Answering emails. Saying I'm fine when people asked. But not sleeping. Not really eating. Just existing in the strange suspended state of someone whose life has just been permanently rearranged. That's when I met David Carver. He wasn't a stranger. That's the thing that makes this so hard to explain to people who weren't there. David Carver was the husband of my mother's coworker. He had been at the funeral. He had shaken my hand and said he was sorry for my loss with the kind of eye contact that made you feel like he meant it. He called me 5 days later. Said he'd been thinking about me. Said he knew this was a difficult time. Said, and this is the line I have replayed in my head 1,000 times since, he said, "Your father worked so hard for everything he had. I just want to make sure that money works as hard for you as he worked for his family." I said thank you. I said I appreciated that. I said I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. He said take your time. No pressure. But when you're ready, I'd love to sit down with you. Just to talk. No obligation. I said okay. I want to ask you something right now. If someone said those exact words to you, 3 weeks after you buried your father, what would you do? Would you take the meeting? Would you trust someone who'd been at the funeral, who knew your family, who spoke about your father with what felt like genuine respect? Tell me in the comments. Because I have asked myself this question 100 times. And I still don't have a clean answer. I took the meeting. We met at a coffee shop near my office on a Wednesday afternoon. David came with a leather folder and a calm that I now recognize as the specific calm of someone who has run this meeting many times before. He ordered water. He didn't touch it. He didn't pitch anything for the first 40 minutes. He talked about my father. Asked questions about the store. Asked what it had meant to the family. Asked what it had meant to me. And I answered. I answered more than I meant to because grief does that. It makes you want to talk about the person you lost to anyone who seems to want to listen. Then, gently, he moved to the money. He said he understood I had come into some funds recently. He said he wasn't going to pretend he didn't know. My mother had mentioned it to his wife and he wanted to be upfront about that. He said he had a vehicle, that was the word he used, vehicle, that he had been using for select clients for the past 4 years. Average annual return of 31%. He had documentation. He had client testimonials. He had a chart that showed a smooth upward line interrupted only by small dips that always recovered. I asked questions. I thought they were smart questions. I asked about the strategy. I asked about risk. I asked about liquidity, which I had just learned was the word for how quickly you could get your money back. He had answers for everything. Calm, confident, detailed answers that made me feel like I was having a conversation with someone who knew what he was doing and was letting me in on something valuable. I went home and told my wife I was thinking about it. She said, "Ryan, are you sure? We don't know this person." I said, "He was at Dad's funeral. He knows Mom. He's not a stranger." She said, "That doesn't mean he knows what he's doing with money." I said, "The returns speak for themselves." She looked at me for a long moment and then she said, "Okay. In the way that means I don't agree, but I'm not going to fight you on this." I should have listened to that look. I didn't. I transferred $80,000 to David Carver's investment vehicle on a Monday morning in April. Not the full 160. I told myself I was being careful. I was only investing half. The other 80 I would leave alone. That was my safety net. That was me being responsible. The first 3 months were extraordinary. I received a statement every month. Professional looking. Clean design. My 80,000 had become 87,000. Then 92. Then 98. I was watching my father's money grow and I felt something I am ashamed to admit. I felt proud of myself. I felt like I was finally doing what my father had been too cautious to do. Taking his money and making it work. I called David and said I wanted to add more. He said, "Ryan, are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured." I said I was sure. I transferred the other 80,000 in July. Now here's what I want you to understand about what happened next. Because this is the part that matters. This is the part where I need you to really listen. Nothing dramatic happened immediately. There was no sudden crash. No urgent phone call. No red flags waving in my face. What happened was slow. Gradual. Like water finding a crack and widening it so slowly you don't notice until the wall is already coming down. In September, the statements stopped arriving on time. I called David. He apologized. Said there had been an administrative issue. Said everything was fine. Statement came a week late. Numbers looked normal. In October, I asked to withdraw 20,000. Just to test the process. Just to see how the liquidity worked in practice. David said of course. Said it would take 10 to 14 business days due to the nature of the investment cycle. 21 days later the money had not arrived. I called. He said there had been a delay. Regulatory issue. Nothing to worry about. 30 days later still nothing. I started searching his name online. I found almost nothing. The company name he had given me had a website. Professional looking. Clean design. Same as the statements. I searched the website's registration date. It had been created 7 months ago. For months before he came to my father's funeral. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. Have you ever had a moment where you realize something terrible not all at once but in pieces, where each piece arrives a few seconds apart and each one is worse than the last? That is what the next 60 seconds felt like, sitting at my kitchen table at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night with my laptop open and my wife asleep upstairs. The website. 7 months old. The company. Not registered with any financial regulator I could find. The testimonials on his site. When I searched the names, fake. Stock photos. I called David's number. Disconnected. I called his wife's work to reach my mother's coworker. She said, David moved to Vancouver 3 weeks ago. I thought you knew. I filed a police report the next morning. The detective was kind. He sat across from me in a small office with a coffee that had gone cold, and he listened to everything I said, and then he told me something that I have thought about every day since. He said, Mr. Mitchell, what happened to you has a name. It's called a grief scam. There are people who specifically target individuals in the weeks following a significant loss because grief impairs judgment in a very specific way. It makes people want to take action. Want to do something meaningful with what they've inherited. Want to honor the person they lost by being smart with what was left behind. These individuals identify targets at funerals, at estate sales, through family connections. Your case is not unusual. I wish I could tell you it was. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, Can I get my money back? He looked at me. He didn't say no. He said, These cases are very difficult to prosecute and recovery of funds is uncommon. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. $160,000. My father's 31 years. Gone. I had to go inside and tell my wife. That was the hardest thing I have ever done. Not the loss itself. Telling her. Watching her face as I explained what had happened. She didn't yell. She didn't say I told you so. She just sat there and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before and have never seen since. We sat in the kitchen until 2 in the morning, not saying much. I'm going to tell you where I am now. It's been 4 years. We didn't lose the house. I went back to work the next day and every day after that. We rebuilt. Slowly. Carefully. In ways that felt nothing like the 31% annual returns on a fake statement. But here is what I want you to hear. The money was not the worst part. The worst part was the specific shame of knowing that my father spent 31 years building something with his hands, and I lost it in 18 months to a man I met at his funeral. That shame does not have a dollar amount. It does not go away when you rebuild your savings. It sits there quietly in the background of every financial decision you make from that day forward. I check everything now. Every person. Every company registration. Every claim. Every return that sounds too consistent to be real. My father used to say, if someone wants to do something for you badly enough that they come to you, ask yourself why they need to come to you instead of waiting for you to come to them. I didn't understand what he meant until I was sitting in my car in my driveway at 30 years old with nothing left of his life's work. I understand now. I want to ask you something before I go. Have you ever trusted someone with money, a friend, a family member, an advisor, anyone, and felt that specific fear afterward where you realize you have no way of knowing if the trust was deserved? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And if someone in your life is grieving right now, someone who has just inherited something, just lost someone, share this with them. Not because I want the views. Because David Carver is still out there. Different city. Different name. Same leather folder. Same calm. Same line about making money work as hard as the person who earned it. The detective was right. My case was not unusual. Make sure yours isn't either. My name is Ryan Mitchell. This was my story. Next week, I'm going to tell you about the business I started with what was left, and the person inside that business who made David Carver look like a beginner. Subscribe. Because that story is worse than this one. And I promise you, you need to hear it.